So, snatched from the green place of many mothers, young Furiosa falls into the hands of a biker horde led by Chris Hemsworth with a fantastic nose, who plays Dementus. Sweeping through the wastelands, they come across the Citadel that we saw in Fury Road, presided over by Immortan Joe. And as the two tyrants fight for dominance, Furiosa soon finds herself on a non-stop battle for revenge and eventually to make her way home. So let's talk about Mad Max first, because the very first movie, which starred Mel Gibson, was a cheapo, wasn't just a B movie. This was a real sort of Z kind of revenge movie that found notoriety. It was followed by The Road Warrior, for me, still the best out of all the Mad Max films. And it changed cinema, to be honest. We got a new kind of science fiction post-apocalyptic film that we had never seen before. So much so that it became almost a staple of what you imagine post-apocalyptic world to look like. Fantastic cars that paid homage to movies like The Cars That Ate Paris. You got a look that transcended into music videos. I remember Duran Duran's Wild Boys.
Mm-hmm.
The budget started to go up. Mel Gibson became a big star, and the film got bigger with the third film, Beyond Thunderdome. Then we had a lot of time off before Fury Road, to which has now been garnered as one of the best action films of all time, which is basically just a huge car chase for 2 or so hours. But it's interesting to see where Mad Max came from, and how it's become a part of culture from these initial Z-B movies. And now we've got Furiosa, which is a sort of a sidestep as we explore more of the Mad Max world. And we see it through different eyes. In this case, we don't see Furiosa played by Charlize Theron. This time it's by Anna Taylor-Joy. And just before I talk about it, did you find the transition from the young Furiosa to the older Furiosa to be almost incredibly seamless?
Yeah, it was really good progression.
You don't know, do you? When you watch it,
the film starts with her as a young child when she first gets abducted. But I couldn't point at the moment when it became Anya Taylor-Joy. I can't highlight that moment because the transitional moments, and there's clearly some CGI tinkering that's been done in order to make it so smooth. It just feels you never for one moment think this might be a different person. You straight away are completely caught up in it. It's interesting with Furiosa because when it was announced, as excited as I was to see more exploration to the Mad Max thing, I thought, well, was there any story to tell there? But then as I dwelled on it, I thought, well, if she wanted to rescue people from Immortan Joe, why was she so respected by Immortan Joe's community? And that's what this story is about. This is about how this girl from a land of abundance ended up becoming a road warrior herself, basically. And it's all because she gets embroiled the same way that Max does in other people's conflicts and has to choose sides, not because she agrees with what that side is doing, but for the lesser of two evils to serve her own purpose. And this is the backstory that we're getting told. And boy, I mean, I turned to you when the end credits started rolling on this and just said, and I'm going to edit it and censor it a bit because I did say it with expletives, George Miller, you fabulously, marvelously mad bugger. Because that was the initial impression that I got at the end, is like, this is just exactly what he brings to the Mad Max franchise each time. He's just bonkers, absolutely bonkers, but in a gloriously over-the-top way that works to entertain.
It's a slightly different pacing. Fury Road was non-stop. In fact, you needed to take breaks in Fury Road because every few minutes there would be an action sequence. You would just get a chance for a breather and then something else happened. There's a lot of character building within this, and that's down to the fact that you've got Alayla Brown, who plays the very young Furiosa, and then you've got Taylor Joy. It's superb casting, but it's more about fleshing out her character. She's a pleasure to watch in this film. I think there's a grace to her, and a bit like Charlize Theron, they were both dancers at some point, and there's a litheness in the way that she moves. She doesn't have a lot to say. There's very little dialogue from her. We'll talk about where the dialogue comes from in a minute. But she's got this agility, and she's got this sort of this element of cunning, and everything is done with and through her eyes, and it makes it just a fantastic, empathetic performance as well as a physical performance. But as I said, she doesn't have a lot to say, but that's made up by Chris Hemsworth as Dementus. And I just got the feeling that we finally had Hemsworth unleashed in this film, because he has so much to say, and most of the dialogue comes from Chris Hemsworth.
He's clearly having a lot of fun in this film. He is absolutely on fire. He's the bad guy you love to hate, because you know that he's a nasty piece of work, but you kind of start rooting for him at some points, because you think, I want to see this character even more, and I would love to see. I know that George Miller said that he's got ideas for other films, either directly Mad Max or spun off from. I'd love to see more backstory for this character. I want to see this character's origin story, because that could be a riot. And this is what George Miller has done with all the Mad Max films. He's created villains that you kind of really enjoy watching on screen. Every one of the Mad Max films has an interesting villain in there that you think, yeah, I can kind of see your point to some degree, even though you're a nutter. It's fun. It's energetic. Is it a patch on Fury Road? No. It's nowhere near Fury Road. And I think one of the letdowns in this in particular is there seems to be a lot more reliance on CGI in this one than what Fury Road did. Fury Road did have a lot of CGI, but it was used cleverly. A lot of the stuff was practical. But I did read that because of the various delays in productions, the various problems that he had with making this one, and how grand it was, that CGI was needed significantly more. And it's noticeable at moments that it looks, it looked comic booky and cartoony at times, which kind of works for the Mad Max universe. But it is jarring that over the end credits, and it's not a spoiler to say over the end credits, it shows clips from Fury Road. And at that point, you can see the difference in the production values.
There's
so
much more physicality to that, isn't there?
Yeah, it basically shows you on the closing credits, it's basically like, here's what you could have won. But it's not to say that Furiosa's a bad film. By all means, it's not. It was a great cinematic adventure, and I had a blast watching it. Were you eagle-eyed enough to... it was quite obvious, so I'm hoping you did spot Max himself in there.
Yeah, I did, and there was a question that kind of cropped up on that. Did he help Furiosa at that point? It kind of left it a little bit ambiguous. This is, as ever, from Miller, who is now in his 80s, a remarkable achievement. No one does an action film like George Miller. This time, though, we've got more world building, and everything he does is always fully realized. You're immersed into this world. You don't need to know how things happened. You just know that it's happened, and it's left the world in such a way. Action sequences are, as ever, phenomenal. But at the heart of it, it's a revenge flick, like any Western. Someone trying to track down the person who killed their parent.
Yeah.
And for that, it feels different enough, but it feels as though it fits in to the Mad Max world and saga. I do hope, though, that the next Miller film, even though he said he'd work with Hemsworth again, I would love him to do Thor, but I want to see one final Mad Max film.
I think he should make a sequel to Babe, Pig in the City, and do Babe, Pig in the Apocalypse, and set it in the Mad Max universe.
Who knows? This is in the tradition of It reminded me of arachnophobia. It
Yeah.
reminded me of Alien. It reminded me of Tremors, that kind of horror that has comedic elements to it. So the story starts with a bit of a bang as a comet or meteorite crashes into an apartment block where 12-year-old Charlotte, you see what they did there? Charlotte, it'll make sense later on,
Web.
played
Yeah.
by Alila Brown, who we last saw as the young Furiosa, discovering a spider in her apartment building. She decides to keep it as a pet, but then noticed that the spider has strange behaviors, rapid growth, mimicry, and then the bodies start to pile up. This, in every way, is classic B movie material. Now, the film is Australian, with Australian actors doing very good American accents. And it's usually a thing for me, and I've talked about this with you before, that I can always tell when something is shot in Australia and they're doubling for the States. But because of this was a confined space with some pretty decent cut-in shots of Brooklyn, I thought it worked really, really well. And I didn't get that sense that this was actually an Australian cast.
Mm.
I wouldn't have minded if it was still set in Australia. It wouldn't have affected the plot whatsoever. And I think this film will work for you depending on your fear of spiders.
Yeah, completely agree. I had my eye on this because I do like spider monster movies. You know, all the films that you mentioned, like Arachnophobia, etc. I've always loved. I mean, Eight-Legged Freaks is one of my favorite B movies of recent decades. And I wanted that kind of B movie kind of approach because I think when you do like a giant spider movie, you can try to make it gritty and serious, but it's a lot more fun when it's taking that B movie, almost tongue in cheek approach at times. And watching this, as soon as it opened with that comet coming towards Earth, it was like, it's going to be a spider from space. I was on cloud nine. I was just like, this is exactly what I want. I want it to be a bit preposterous. And yes, it does have some serious elements in there. And yes, some of the gross out effects are pretty well handled and shocking and chilling. But there's a good spirit of just having fun within there, particularly with the inclusion of the pest controller, who they call out, who the film opens. It does that great thing that I love on these kind of films, where it opens with a midpoint of the film before it flashes backwards. And it opens with him to let you know from the start, it's like, this is not going to be totally serious, so get on board with it now, and you're going to have fun. And from that point onwards, I had a lot of fun with this. I thought that the effects work, which was from Weta Digital. So, of course, it was going to be great effects work. There's like combination of CGI, but also puppetry going on. And it all blends well. And I loved the fact it was a confined setting in one apartment block and just the myriad of characters that inhabit it who, you know, come into contact with this weird spider creature. This was B-movie fun.
It was B-movie fun. I thought it took a long time to get going, and I was phasing out. I mean, it's not a long film. It's 90-odd minutes long. But it felt as though in 90 minutes that it was packed with a lot of the family drama, and I was waiting for stuff to happen. Now, the actors were compelling. Alea Brown, as we'd already seen in Furiosa, can carry a film. She's a great young actor, and I'm interested to see where her career goes. I like the fact that she's called Charlotte. I thought was a nice wink to the camera and sort of set itself up. It only got interesting for me is when the spider attacks. There was a lot of the family drama that we'd seen before, and it felt padded and it felt unnecessary. But when it kicks in, especially into the third act, when it becomes, and let's be truthful here, they really paid homage to Alien with going through air vents and torches, and it looked great, and it became very, very creepy. I'm not particularly scared by spiders, neither do I really like them either. So I wasn't grossed out by the spider itself. And I think a lot of a lot of what you think about spiders will affect how you get into this film. But as you said, Andy, it's just a good, fun B movie. It wasn't great for me. I did enjoy it. I think it took its time to get to where it eventually went. You always knew where it was going to go, and of course, there was a little coda, and again, you saw that coming. But it was thoroughly enjoyable. I can't see it doing well on the big screen. I think if you're going to find this film, especially after, in light of everything we've just talked about, it's going to make its mark on home viewing.
Yeah, it'll definitely get a very good home video cult following on this film. The same way that Eight-Legged Freaks did. Eight-Legged Freaks didn't do great on the cinema, but it became such a fan favourite on home release. This is where these kind of films sit comfortably, and I would be happy to see more films done in this kind of low budget B movie-esque kind of
Yeah.
way. Homages to the films of yesteryear that we used to love.